arms, I'm holding my adorable great-granddaughter, Angela. Holding my own children was special, but there's something uniquely wonderful about holding grandchildren and great-grandchildren. However, it seems that families these days have fewer children. Looking at my own children and their kids, they usually have 2, maybe 3 at most. I often find myself reminiscing about the past when families were larger and homes were bustling with more children. However, getting to hold this baby wasn't without its challenges. About 50 years ago, I married Sharon, a childhood friend from the neighborhood. We went on to have 5 kids together. They were all boys. At this rate, we could start a baseball team. Sharon and I used to joke. During my generation, both our families valued having many children, so naturally, we hoped for a life surrounded by a large family.
But any more might stretch the budget too thin, I guess.
Sharon murmured, looking at the household accounts after our 5th child was born. Considering both our families had 4 siblings each, I think we did pretty well. Despite talk of economic growth and prosperity at the time, my earnings didn't see much of that benefit, and we lived a hand-to-mouth existence. Being blessed with 5 children is enough. But, I did wish for a daughter too, I said, to which Sharon agreed.
That would have been nice.
Regardless, each of our sons was precious to us. Our parents were overjoyed to see their grandchildren, and my brother Matthew often came over to lovingly hold my children.
Up you go,
He'd say, lifting them high, as the others gathered around, clamoring for their turn.
Boys, take turns.
He would say, laughing joyfully.
Matthew really loves kids.
Sharon would remark, smiling fondly at him. Whenever he visited, he brought loads of food and toys, knowing how tough things were for us. In fact, he helped us through a particularly tough time. When our youngest Oliver fell ill at 1 year old, incurring significant medical expenses. Sharon and I couldn't afford to take time off work, struggling daily. Desperate, I turned to Matthew for help.
Leave it to me,
He declared, taking over the childcare while we worked. Matthew and his wife also frequently visited the hospital. Thankfully, Oliver recovered and was discharged. I can't imagine what we would have done without Matthew.
We really owe Matthew a lot.
I agreed with Sharon's words. I was the second child, and Matthew was the much-anticipated firstborn. Being the eldest of 4, he was incredibly caring. He often planned outings to the mountains or river and took the lead in cooking when our parents were busy. Despite his own studies and chores, he excelled academically and eagerly tutored us. Kind and reliable, he was everyone's role model. Good at figures, he landed a job with a major construction company after college. I couldn't have been prouder of my brother. I always thought his kids would be just as remarkable. Seeing Matthew play the villain in superhero games with my sons.
Hey, come over.
I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. Matthew married later than I did. Soon after, his wife was pregnant. However, they never had the chance to welcome their child. Despite numerous hospital visits and treatments, it turned out they had difficulty conceiving. Over the 8 years it took us to have our 5 children, they never had any of their own. Eventually, he stopped talking about having children altogether.
Matthew must have really wanted kids.
Sharon's wistful words stayed with me. Half a year later, I'm standing in the delivery room. As it turned out, Sharon was pregnant again before our 5th son Oliver was hospitalized. Soon, I heard the cry of our newborn, and Sharon and I were introduced to our adorable 6th child, wrapped in a swaddle.
It's a girl.
Sharon said with a joyous smile, nearly making me jump for joy. Holding our long-awaited daughter, handed to me by the midwife, I couldn't help but shed tears of happiness. I was really happy. Even thinking of a name felt precious. Yet, reality wasn't so simple. Oliver's medical expenses had us worried about our future financial stability. Then one day, Matthew and his wife came to our house with serious faces. Out of the blue, they asked,
Could we possibly adopt your sixth child?
leaving both Sharon and me astonished. Matthew hadn't given up on having a child. In those days, there were no options like IVF, so adopting was the only choice he had. He thought he could be happy just with his wife, but playing with our kids made him realize he couldn't give up the desire for his own. I knew all too well how much he longed for a child, having seen his longing looks. But it wasn't easy to just say yes and hand over our precious child. We managed to send T-wife home that day, and Sharon and I talked it through all night.
We really want to raise her ourselves.
Sharon consistently said. I didn't want to give up our long-awaited daughter to anyone else either. Yet, I couldn't shake off the image of Matthew's lonely side profile when he looked at my kids. Besides, I had always been taken care of by him since we were little. Part of me wanted to help him in some way. By dawn, as we reached our conclusion, it was to give our daughter up for adoption. Weighing the kindness Matthew always showed us against our financial reality, Sharon tearfully decided to let our daughter be adopted. When we later told Matthew and his wife, they thanked us with tears. Whether it was the right decision, I still can't say for sure. Matthew probably felt the same. They named our daughter Anna, and not long after, Matthew moved to Canada for a job, taking Anna with him. We kept up with Anna's growth through letters and saw her when they visited.
Joseph.
Anna would hug me when she saw me. Seeing her grow up so well made both Sharon and me happy. But we couldn't bring ourselves to tell her that her birth parents were actually us. Finding the right moment was difficult for Matthew and his wife too, always thinking it was too soon, and so we kept putting it off. 20 years had passed since giving Anna up. Matthew contacted us to say Anna was getting married, and wanted us at the wedding. Having not seen her for years, I was excited but also a bit nervous. I wondered if she knew she was adopted. I couldn't bring myself to ask Matthew over the phone, and I was too afraid to ask directly. Sharon and I went to the wedding together. Seeing her in her pure white wedding dress was moving. Anna, once so small, had grown into a beautiful woman. She was blessed by everyone, and beside me, Sharon quietly said with crying,
Anna looks beautiful. To think she's grown up so much.
A flood of emotions welled up in my chest too. At the same time, I felt complicated because we still hadn't explained to her that we were her biological parents. After the ceremony, we went to congratulate her. Seeing her in front of us, both Sharon and I felt like we were about to cry. Then, Anna slowly stood up and took turns holding our hands.
Thank you for giving birth to me. Dad, Mom.
She said. We were frozen, not knowing how to react. Then, Matthew standing beside us said,
Actually, I've already told her that she was adopted, and about her real parents. Well, I guess the cat's out of the bag.
He seemed a bit sheepish towards the end. Apparently, Anna had found out she was adopted when checking her family registry for her marriage.
I was actually a bit angry. Because no one told me anything.
Anna's words pierced my heart like thorns. Sharon looked down, guilty. It seemed Matthew and his wife hadn't managed to reveal her adoption status until just before her wedding. Of course, it wasn't just their responsibility. Sharon and I had also kept putting off explaining to Anna that we were her birth parents. Even my children never told her that they were actually her brothers.
Wait, Anna was our sister.
Only Oliver, who was about 2 at the time she was adopted, seemed surprised and couldn't grasp the situation. I had explained to the other sons about giving Anna to Matthew, and though we didn't ask them to keep it a secret, they seemed to understand the situation and had kept silent until then.
When I first found out I was adopted, I was in shock. But when I found out Joseph was actually my dad, I felt a bit relieved.
Anna shared.
If I was the child of the uncle I loved, then I figured it wasn't much of a problem. So, I was able to switch gears pretty quickly. I was told about why I was given up for adoption. So, I don't blame anyone. Besides, I had a great life in Canada. I'm grateful to both the parents who gave me life and the ones who raised me. Both are equally important to me.
Her smile brought tears to our eyes. She had grown into a fine and kind person, much like Matthew. Anna, who had lived in Canada, came back to America upon getting married. Since then, every year during summer vacation, she would visit our house too. She meets up with her brothers often, but her attitude towards them hasn't changed even after finding out they're her biological brothers. Maybe because they were already close, whether she was adopted or a relative by blood, it didn't matter. Seeing them get along well even now brings me relief and joy. More than 20 years have passed since that wedding. Matthew has retired and moved back to America with his wife. When our family gathers like this, it's quite a crowd. Now, I am holding Angela, Anna's granddaughter, in my arms. She giggles joyfully. Memories of when Anna was born flashback, making me nostalgic. Surely, this baby will grow up to be as noble and kind as Matthew and as Anna. Here we go. Up high. Holding Angela, I savor the joy of watching her grow up as a proud great-grandfather.